Next, on the September 21st, 2018 edition of Roland Martin Unfiltered, lawyers for the family of Botham Jean want the Dallas DA to charge the cop who killed him with murder. We'll talk with Lee Merritt and Ben Crump live right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered. The defense team of the Chicago cop who killed Laquan McDonald will begin their case on Monday. We'll talk with a WGN radio reporter on what to expect. A sheriff in New Jersey was running his racist mouth and it was caught on tape. We'll play it for you and talk live with the chair of the Black Republican Club of Bergen County who says she is not shocked. A true trailblazer in black journalism is beginning to get the recognition she deserves, and a statue of Alice Dunnigan was unveiled today at the museum in D.C. We were there and we'll share with all of you. Hurricane Maria, 1 year later, devastated Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, but the pain continues no matter how much Donald Trump lies about it. Plus, I'll break down to you the hypocrisy of white conservative evangelical Christians who say they are pro-life but haven't said a damn thing about Botham Jean, a Christian who led worship. Oh, y'all don't want to miss that. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the biz, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, rolling with Roland now. He's funky, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now. Martin.
A Dallas cop who killed Botham Jean has been charged with manslaughter, yet the lawyers for the family say she should be charged with murder. Dallas DA Faith Johnson, an African-American, she has said that she is open to that idea. The attorneys question exactly what happened that night. Of course, Amber Geiger has given numerous stories about what took place. We know she went to the wrong apartment. She says initially she tried to unlock the door, had an issue, and later she said in an affidavit that the door was open, and then she simply walked in. They say clearly something else took place here based upon the witnesses who reported hearing her say, "Let me in," and knocking loudly on the door. Joining us right now are two of the family's attorneys, Benjamin Crump and Lee Merritt. Gentlemen, welcome back to Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hi, Roland.
Lee, I want to start with you. The DA says she is open to charging him with murder, but explain to the audience, though, the difference between manslaughter and murder, because that dictates exactly what kind of charge can be made.
Well, manslaughter indicates that there was some sort of reckless behavior that resulted in the death of a human being. A murder is saying that what happened was intentional. And nothing that Amber Geiger has described, even in her own version or many of her versions of events, described an unintentional act. In each of her stories, although they're changing, she has said that she took aim at a person or someone she believed to be a person and fired at them. Body center mass officers are trained to do, killing them. And so I don't think this case has been handled right from the beginning. It should have been considered a murder without any description of how Geiger's intent was reckless or unintentional.
Ben Crump, I want to go to you because obviously a DA has to pursue certain charges by going to the grand jury. And we always hear the phrase a DA can indict a ham sandwich, but you obviously want to charge folks properly because look what happened to Dante Servin in Chicago, where the judge said he was charged in a wrong way, let him free, and Rekia Boyd's murderer has never been brought to trial. And so in calling for him to be charged with murder, what is your legal rationale as to why that should be the charge or the indictment as opposed to manslaughter?
Well, on multiple fronts, and I agree with Attorney Merritt. There are things that can be done to charge her with murder if that is the desire, Roland. When you think about her unbelievable story. If this is anybody else who allegedly goes to the wrong apartment, kill an innocent person who is lawfully in their apartment minding their own business, you or I will be charged with murder. It would be no question about it. So this DA has the right to treat her like any other citizen. They can't have it both ways. Either she is not on duty as she purported to be, and the city is trying to allege, or they are giving her preferential treatment because she's a police officer. Either way, when you look at this story and the way the story has evolved and continues to change, once we find that she is lying, then that is malice of forethought, and she should be charged with murder. Because not only do you have the homicide of an innocent young man, but now you have her lying about it, and that equals murder.
Now, again, she's given two different statements already. She's given one statement to the police in the initial report, and then an affidavit was filed. And so, if it is discovered that she is lying, could that charge also be added? Because if one of us lied to a cop in an official report, they could actually charge us for lying.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so very important that we document everything she says. I know Attorney Merritt, Attorney Washington, and I, we've not only been out to the scene, we've not only talked to witnesses, but we've also looked at the different probable cause affidavits between the police, Dallas Police Department, and the Texas Rangers. And now we'll see what the next story is, Roland.
Lee?
Yeah, anytime you have somebody changing their story, they in an official capacity, all those statements they give are sworn statements, so they hold themselves out to perjury charges. But more importantly, it allows for this false narrative, and this is something that the legal team has been talking about recently. We've been hearing a lot about the idea that we don't want to ruin two lives, and so we should take it easy on this woman. Because it was an accident, and that was her intent in telling these false stories in the beginning, to hide how culpable the malice behind her actions, and that's absurd. And our legal system, for all other people, non-law enforcement, and when the victim isn't a black person, we don't say, well, we don't want to ruin the murderer's lives. We focus on properly punishing the criminal.
Obviously, this is a situation where you have a black police chief in Dallas, a black woman there. You have a black female district attorney there in Dallas as well. And of course, we have an election that's also coming up. And so Faith Johnson is paying attention to that as well. What has been the last conversation with her, and any idea when she plans to take this to the grand jury for them to consider an actual indictment? Because thus far, Amber Geiger has been charged. She was out on bail in less than an hour.
Well, I want to believe that Faith Johnson will do the right thing. I know Lee Merritt and Darrell Washington with Jordan Edwards was very happy that she did the right thing in getting that conviction. And I believe this is just as conclusive as that she should be convicted of a crime. But I want to step back for just a second, Roland Martin. It is preposterous when you think about the fact that she broke and entered Botham Jones' apartment, and now she's somewhat suggesting a self-defense claim. Now, how asinine is that? You break in my house and then you shoot and kill me, and now you're kind of suggesting it was a big, dark, shadowy figure, and so it's self-defense. Black people get killed by police officers in some of the most arbitrary ways, and I've said it before, driving while black people in their cars, walking while black people are in their neighborhoods, and now in Botham Jones' case, living while he's in his apartment. And so for them to suggest that she was in fear of her life, and it's just preposterous that if they're going to use that as a defense.
Final comment with you. There's a case out of Maryland where police thought they were busting through the home of a drug dealer, and it was at the house of an innocent man. That man did fire at police, and he was not charged.
Right, we see a lot of the similarities in that case, where you have a mistake of fact, and that's really what it comes down to. If Miss Geiger could articulate that there was a mistake of fact that would justify the use of force, then she has the ability to get off for her crime. The reason I don't think that applies here, similar to the man in Maryland, is because even if what was going on in her mind was reality, she still committed murder, and we saw that with the jury's decision in the case of Roy Oliver. Roy Oliver decided to use force as a police officer again, in a situation that was not justified, where he could not articulate any danger to himself. Amber Geiger saying, "I see a black silhouette," which really is code word for a large black man standing in front of me. And the decision to use force in that situation, it's not a mistake of fact that would justify the use of deadly force, and so she should still be properly charged with murder.
All right, gentlemen, Lee Merritt as well as Ben Crump, we certainly appreciate it, and we'll certainly keep our eyes on this case. We've been focusing on it every single day, and will not let up. Thanks a lot.
We appreciate it.
Thank you, Roland.
Appreciate it, folks. In Chicago, Officer Jason Van Dyke is on trial for the murder of Laquan McDonald. Prosecution, they have arrested. On Monday, his defense team will begin their phase of the case. We have been covering this as well. You might recall it was several years ago when McDonald was shot and killed there. That's the video of him in the street. Initially, police reported that McDonald lunged at them with a knife. Yet when you saw that video, he was not walking towards those cops. They lied in those initial statements. We also know that several cops went to the nearby Burger King and actually looked at the video from their cameras. That video mysteriously disappeared. Folks strongly believe it was erased by Chicago police officers. Several of those officers involved in the case have been fired or have retired as a result. And so we want to go to WGN radio reporter out of Chicago, who has been covering this case, Dometi Pongo. How you doing, Doc?
I'm good. How are you, Roland? It's good to talk to you as always.
Great. The prosecution has arrested. Give our viewers an understanding of what took place in that courtroom. They called 24 different witnesses. The last one, of course, was an expert on use of force, who said that clearly they fired far too many shots to kill Laquan McDonald.
Yeah, 24 witnesses called over a span of 4 days. And Yuri Patrick was one of the ones who said that Officer Jason Van Dyke did not have probable cause to shoot Laquan McDonald 16 times. He said that even if Laquan was a threat to police officers, he was surely not a threat far before that 16th shot was fired. They also called up Jose Torres, which was a witness, a bystander who was in his car at the time the shooting happened. He says in the courtroom, the thing that he said was, "Why the F are they shooting him so many times?" This is what he said in the courtroom. They also called up a ballistics expert, Scott Patterson, who analyzed how long it takes for 16 shots to go off, so that the witnesses, the jurors, even in opening statements, counted to 16 just so the jurors could see what it felt like to count to 16, how long that takes. And what he found, the ballistics expert, was that Van Dyke shot for 14 seconds. And that Laquan was on the ground for 12 of those seconds.
This is a special prosecutor who was trying this case, correct?
Yes, from Kane County. We're in Cook County. The special prosecutors from Kane County.
And that was because, of course, when this case initially came up, Anita Alvarez was highly criticized. They also would not release that particular tape. She was defeated at the ballot box, and her successor, Cook County State's Attorney Fox, a black woman, said that a special prosecutor should be handling this case.
Yeah, they have to take it out of Cook County. And this was actually a point of contention throughout the jury selection. They said they actually want to take the trial out of Cook County because they didn't think that any jurors could be unbiased in this case, saying that this case was so widely talked about throughout the county that it was impossible for anyone to be unbiased. The judge, Vincent Gahn, didn't go with that. You know, we decided to have the trial here in Cook County. But Anita Alvarez wasn't the only person that ended up being let go throughout all of this fallout. We also lost Superintendent Gary McCarthy. He was fired as a result of this. There was a lot of political fallout. And just to paint the picture for you, Roland, too, here in Chicago, the Black Mile, the Magnificent Mile, this is a shopping corridor on Michigan Avenue in Chicago, famous spot. It'd be Fifth Avenue if it was New York City. Activists shut down Michigan Avenue on Black Friday. to let the city know that they wouldn't stand for this. They said if you hit the city's pocketbooks, that they have to do something in the courtroom. And then subsequently, Anita Alvarez lost her jobs. Kim Foxx was elected. Superintendent Gary McCarthy was fired as Chicago police superintendent. And now he's actually running for mayor. And Mayor Rahm Emanuel has announced that he will not be seeking a third term.
Last question for you. Are we seeing a significant number of Chicago police at the courthouse in support of Jason Van Dyke? Are we seeing any police officers who are saying, I'm not standing up for this guy?
Well, he's certainly being escorted to the courthouse by a cadre of police officers. He has to wear a bulletproof vest when he's walking out. He's wearing a bulletproof vest when he's coming into the courtroom. You don't see anyone coming out against Officer Jason Van Dyke, which is very interesting. You might have ballistics experts like the ones the prosecution's called, or the use of force expert, talking about the fact that, this amount of force wasn't needed. But as you stated when you did your dialogue on John Burge, there's a blue rule, a blue wall in the city of Chicago, and officers stick together. They often say that not all cops are bad cops, but they're always reluctant to point out who those bad cops actually are.
So where are those good cops? Mr. Pongo, I appreciate it. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you, Roland.
All right, folks, let's now go to New Jersey. Oh, this is a doozy. New Jersey Sheriff Michael Sardino has gotten caught on tape making racist comments about the inaugural address of New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy. Check this out.
He talked about the whole thing, the marijuana, sanctuary state, better criminal justice reform. Rest away. In other words, let the blacks come in and do whatever the they want, smoke the marijuana, do this, do that, and don't worry about it. We'll tie the hands of cops.
The comments caused so much backlash that he issued an apology. He's sorry for the insensitive recorded remarks that were made public, but is he sorry for the remarks or that they were made public? Now, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy doesn't think so. He is calling for the resignation of the sheriff. Now, my next guest says there's a pattern of disrespect for black folks under his leadership. Joining me now is Monica Brinson. She's the president of the African American Republican Club of Bergen County, New Jersey. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you today? And thank you for having me on the show.
Well, clearly this sheriff here, he was pretty cool with his comments, and he still has not stepped down. I'm just trying to understand, are there any white folks in that county who smoke weed, or is it just black people?
I mean, according to the sheriff, clearly it's only black people, but I'm sure you can find some white people smoking marijuana.
Well, and here's what was interesting to me. I mean, this is the chief law enforcement officer for the county. This is the person who sets policy, and politically, I understand that he used to be Republican, but now he's a Democrat, and so by the end of the day, he's still a white guy who's in charge.
Correct.
And so, what are the folks, the county commission, what others are saying? I mean, obviously, the governor wants him to quit, but are other folks saying this guy's got to go?
Well, for one, I am disgusted. He's got to go, and he needs to go right now. Last night, I was at an event with my mentor, First Lieutenant Governor Kim Guadagno. She was absolutely disgusted, disappointed, and I haven't talked to any white people who are not appalled. Everyone that I've spoken to, white and they're appalled by this disgusting comment. And, so he says sorry for the racist comment. That's not good enough. A proper apology would be for him to step down. We need the Democrat sheriff, Sardino, if you can hear me now, please step down. That would be the best apology to all the black people that I know in corrupt Bergen County.
Well, it certainly should be the case there. And last question for you. Are there any protests? And who makes the decision? Can he be fired? Can he be forced out? Or is he an elected position? And frankly, it's all up to him whether he comes or goes.
I don't know the process, but I'm hoping that this pressure put on him will help him step down. He has verbally pistol whipped black people. That's what took place. And then he went off on another tangent. Listen, Sheila Alver, she's no favorite of mine with her political views, but to go out and start asking if she's gay because she's single, and he's just disgusting all the way around. He needs to step down. It shouldn't be a crime to be driving while black in Hackensack and in Bergen County. And this is certainly a widespread pattern of practice. He needs to step down. You can see he sets the tone for why police officers feel like they can harass black people in Bergen County. So this Democrat sheriff needs to step down.
All right, then. We certainly appreciate you joining us. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
All right, folks, I want to introduce my panel right now. Joining me on the set, of course, is Kristen Clark. She is the Executive Director and leader of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. We also have Dr. Greg Carr, Howard University, head of Afro-American Studies program. And also joining us is Eugene Craig of the Eugene Craig Organization. Eugene is with us. All right, so how you doing, folks?
Good.
Good. How you?
All right, so I want to start this with, of course, the orange one. We have the Brett Kavanaugh hearing taking place on Monday. We think. Now this battle is going on because Republicans want to insist that the woman who's accusing him of sexual assault testify before he does. Now, if we go back to the Clarence Thomas hearing, Anita Hill testified first, and then Clarence Thomas testified. They forced that to happen in prime time. Kristen, your thoughts in terms of, again, the chess match that is going on here, where Ford says she wants to testify after Kavanaugh.
It's a travesty. It's been 27 years since Anita Hill, and we've learned nothing. It's been tragic seeing the Senate literally stumbling over itself this week, trying to figure out how to do it the right way. But what we know is that how they're handling the alleged sexual assault allegations that have been made by Dr. Ford have been all wrong. What should have happened is President Trump should have ordered the FBI to investigate. We know that there are individuals who may have relevant information. There are all kinds of individuals who know both Kavanaugh and Dr. Ford who have surfaced and signed letters and allegedly were at the party in the home where the incident happened. The FBI knows how to extract information from people who claim today that they may know nothing. Grassley apparently reached out to a woman who posted a statement and said he hasn't heard back. Well, the FBI can compel that woman, make her appear, and make her share what she knows under oath. They're not taking this seriously. And what this does is it sends a dangerous message to girls and women across our country who have experienced sexual assault. Right now, we're watching the senators send them a dangerous message that they don't matter, that they won't be taken seriously, that we really don't want to hear what you have to say. And I think that's incredibly unfortunate. But at the end of the day, this is a high-stakes battle. It's our nation's highest court. And if we're going to put somebody up there for a lifetime, they need to have unimpeachable credentials.
Greg Carr, someone tweeted earlier that because Dr. Ford has said she's been sexually assaulted, if she was called to serve on a jury, she could not serve on a jury of a case involving sexual assault. And the person said, yet Kavanaugh can rule on any case that involves sexual assault.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, what we're seeing at the end of the day is naked power. Mitch McConnell can count. He's clearly got the votes. And that includes two women who, if they thought of themselves as women, should be ashamed of themselves. Of course, thinking about Collins and Murkowski. No one has asked Tim Scott what he's going to do. He's a yes in the yes column. They can count. So they're going to put Kavanaugh on the court. These are elite white males, 11 of whom are going to try to torture this Dr. Ford next week if she indeed testifies. And they're looking for female lawyers to staff them so it doesn't look so obvious. But at the end of the day, even as many of her classmates have signed a letter saying that this culture of alcoholism and sexual assault was rampant at Georgetown Prep and other places, what we're seeing is a handful of elite white males backed by rich folks, rich white males, who have decided this is their last chance to hold on to power. This has nothing to do with ethics or morals, brother.
But here's the thing for me, Eugene. Everyone is talking about, obviously, Murkowski and Collins being critical. But we also, of course, you have Donald Trump, who sent this tweet out. Henry, go to my iPad, please. Trump sent this tweet out this morning, which has enraged lots of people. I have no doubt that if the attack on Dr. Ford was as bad as she says, charges would have been immediately filed with local law enforcement authorities by either her or her loving parents. I ask that she bring those filings forward so that we can learn date, time, and place. Well, obviously, you've seen a number of women tweet out their own personal stories of how they did not say anything for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. Ashley Judd talked about it herself. Simone Sanders discussed being raped as well on social media. Zelina Maxwell has talked about it as well. And so this dude is so clueless because he acts as if women have not been traumatized and are afraid to even go to law enforcement.
Yeah, I mean, even the women that have accused him of particular things have not gone to law enforcement. But I mean, it was an idiotic statement to make. I think it was an asinine statement to make. I mean, we knew it was just a matter of time before he decided to come out and quote unquote start swinging again. But it's statistics have shown that sexual assault and rape are some of the highest unreported crimes, and it's not something that's different here. I mean, you can't reasonably expect a 15-year-old to in a very vulnerable moment like that to say, oh yeah, I'm just going to get up and go to Montgomery County Police and report this.
And the other thing that really jumps out at me is I think when we look at what's happening now is, to your point about McConnell, his whole deal is, I can do what y'all want to do.
I can count.
He said, we're going to push this thing through.
No question.
And they are adamant, Christian, that this vote take place immediately because they are deathly afraid that if there's any further delay, first of all, they want him on the court by October 4th when the Supreme Court reconvenes for their new session. But also they're afraid that there's any further delay, anything happens, that Democrats could potentially take over the United States Senate, and they know that he will not be able to move forward if that happens.
It's unfortunate. We shouldn't play politics with the court, not when we have the Supreme Court at stake. This is the most important court in the land. It sets policy that impacts people's lives all across the country. At the end of the day, Brett Kavanaugh does not deserve that seat if he doesn't have the character. And it's important that the Senate do its job and figure out whether Dr. Ford's allegations are true. And aside from that, we've already had a chance to learn who he is based on his record. We know that he would be dangerous when it comes to civil rights. He is somebody who would be hostile on civil rights matters that go before him. I hope the Senate takes Dr. Ford's claims seriously. The whole country is watching right now, and I think that what they've done this week really is ripped a Band-Aid off of the wounds of sexual assault victims in our country. It's important they slow down, do the right thing, let her be heard, and then have a vote at the end of the day.
Last point on this hearing, go to my iPad. What you'll see here, folks, is that we talked about Lisa Murkowski as well as Susan Collins, but there are 6 Republican women. 6. You have, of course, Lisa Murkowski from Alaska. You have Joni Ernst from Iowa, Susan Collins of Maine. You have Cindy Hyde-Smith of Mississippi. And then you have Deb Fisher of Nebraska. And finally, Shelley Moore Capito of West Virginia. And so the pressures on Collins and Murkowski, Eugene, last one for you. But again, there are 6 Republican women, 4 who aren't saying jack about this issue of sexual harassment.
Yeah, which I think is absolutely crazy, being that, Joni Ernst, hails from the great evangelical Iowa. But more importantly, Shelley Moore Capito went to the same school as Dr. Ford. And I know that I saw the same reports earlier that the letter that are being circulated in support of Dr. Ford, a lot of the alumni there are putting pressure on Senator Capito to actually sign on to it.
So yeah, I'll be very curious to see them actually step up and say something. Last point before we go to a break, we're going to, of course, have our quote of the day, and that is the issue that really jumps out also is that Donald Trump and the Republicans are bleeding white women. They're bleeding white women. They're bleeding when it comes to independence as well. So the question then is, what happens in November? How Ford gets treated on Monday, if she testifies, could somehow come back to haunt them. Even though 53% of white women voted for Donald Trump, as Tamika Mallory said yesterday, that could still have an impact. And so we'll see what happens on Monday. All right, folks, we're going to go to a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about a pioneering black reporter Alice Dunnigan, who was honored today at the museum. We'll be back on Roland Martin Unfiltered in just a moment.
There's a spectrum of Black experience, just as there is of Black views and opinions. Scholar and critic Henry Louis Gates.
A pioneering Black journalist got some long overdue recognition today as the statue of Alice Dunnigan was unveiled at the museum in Washington, D.C. Now, Dunnigan, who died in 1983, was the first African-American female correspondent to receive White House credentials. Dunnigan reported on congressional hearings where blacks were referred to as the N-word, was barred from covering a speech by President Dwight D. Eisenhower in a whites-only theater. In fact, he didn't even speak to her for 2 years. Also, refused to sit down with the press to cover. She was not allowed to sit with the press to cover Senator Robert A. Taft's funeral. She covered the event from a seat in the servants section. She was known for her straight shooting reporting style. Politicians routinely avoided questions from her, which often involved race. She was a reporter for the Associated Negro Press and, look, had a very difficult time there, desperately trying to get paid as a reporter. Of course, that was led by Claude Barnett, and she writes in her own autobiography where she even sold her watch every week, pawned it in order just to be able to eat. And the unveiling took place today. A number of people who were there to celebrate this occasion. Our cameras were there as well. So if you want to understand why Roland Martin Unfiltered matters, we also live stream the unveiling as well as the panel session. And here's some of the highlights.
This has to be an exciting day for Ms. Dunnigan's family.
It is. It's a very exciting day for our family. We're elated. I mean, we're overwhelmed and we're overjoyed. This has been a long time coming, I think, because she's always, like I said before, she's been very famous to us. But for the journalism world, she's huge, very huge.
And so tell us something that folks may not know. When you think about a lot of the men who have been working, who covered the White House, folks know their stories, but very few know about Alice Dunnigan or Ethel Payne.
Yes. Well, as a matter of fact, I remember, Mr. Martin, when I was here, when I was about 13 years old, I spent the summer with Aunt Alice. One thing she always told me, you already have 2 strikes against you because you're a woman and because you're African American. But whatever you do, don't give up the fight. And if she were here today, as humble as she was, she would not want all the hoopla. She would just want change to come. And when I see a particular news reporter now, it reminds me of her because she would ask the tough questions. And if you've ever read her book, those tough questions that she would ask, that's why they had to start submitting a few things in advance. So that's something that just stuck with me. And anything I've ever wanted to do, I knew that I could do it. Even if I were a woman and African, I knew I could do it because I remember what Aunt Alice told me when I was 13 years old.
Well, she was from our city, and we didn't know nothing about her. And she'd done all these things. She'd met all these famous people. She'd been with King, A. Philip Randolph. She'd been with Kennedy, Johnson, but nobody knew nothing about her. So I thought it was important that people find out who she was and what she'd done to help, change our nation.
Because of her courage, because as you know, when Alice Dunnigan was here in Washington, things were not favorable toward black journalists. So she was a freedom fighter in journalism. She had great courage, and that inspires the NMPA today. I think we need to raise up a new generation of freedom fighting journalists like you, Roland. I think that sometimes in our desire to get into the system, in our desire to get into the industry, sometimes we compromise our blackness. Alice Dunnigan never compromised who she was and what she was for the black community.
All right.
And not only did they not really know about her, they didn't know what she was doing and what she was going through in order to pursue this career. A whole lot of what Alice Dunnigan did, she did on her own. She did with virtually no support from her employer. She did it in the face of chauvinism, active, very virulent chauvinism, in addition to the sexism and racism. So she was special in that regard. And she opened the door for Ethel Payne. She made a lot of really amazing coverage happen. She spent 2 years being shut out by the president. He wouldn't answer her questions. And how familiar is that today? So we owe a lot to Allison Dunnigan. Yeah. All right.
All right, folks. It should be one more clip we're going to play from the panel conversation at the museum about Alice Dunnigan. So here we go.
She was a great storyteller. And I could just sit at her feet and listen because the way she wrote, she spoke that way. She wrote the way she spoke in a way that there was always imagery. And she could pull you into the stories and pull you into, you could feel like, wow, I want to meet this person, or wow, really, Grandma? You know, and so that is what I remember about my grandmother and the vision. I was 23 when she passed, but one of the things that I appreciate so much is that as a college student at Howard, majoring in journalism, we became very close because I had the skill, but she helped me tweak the craft. And so she could often give me a point of view that I would not have had one, because of my age, and two, just hadn't lived life long enough, or hadn't really been out, into the community, whatever. But I think having read her autobiography and then Alone Atop the Hill, the thing that I appreciate now is that as I read, I see we can relate now because you've lived, life has hit you, you've experienced some of these things, and now I can understand Mother Alice, some of her stories. I could not understand them to the impact that I understand now, but I can now as a mature adult. Even though, we often, now I have to just speak for my generation, civil rights, we know that it was going on, I'll say forever in a sense, but the 60s, most people hone in on that, but she was pre-civil rights. And that and so the things that she accomplished just really made her before her time.
All right, then, folks. Henry, go to my iPad, please. This is the cover of the book on Alice Dunnigan, Alone Atop the Hill, the autobiography of Alice Dunnigan, pioneer of the National Black Press. It was edited by Carol McCabe Booker, who was on the panel today. She is the widow of Simeon Booker, the longtime reporter, of course, with Jet Magazine. He, of course, has also an amazing book. Both of them were inducted on the same night in the National Association of Black Journalists Hall of Fame. I was there. You can also read about Alice Dunnigan in this book, this new book by Gerald Horne. It's called The Rise and Fall of the Associated Negro Press, Claude Barnett's Pan-African News and the Jim Crow Paradox by Gerald Horne. And in this book, Christian, Alice Dunnigan talks about she was desperate to get a pay raise from Claude Barnett. And he kept rebuffing her, and she was really angry also when there was this huge conference on race taking place across the Atlantic, and he wouldn't send her. And she was the one fighting to do it. I mean, so this, as Sonia said, this is a woman who fought black men, she fought white men, she had to deal with racism and sexism just to do her job, and she, literally had difficulty trying just to eat every week, but kept reporting.
Yep, and I love these unsung heroes that we're finally getting the opportunity to tell their story, lift them up, and celebrate them. There's a powerful quote that she once said, "Without black writers, the world would perhaps never know of the shenanigans and buffoonery employed by those in high places to keep the black man in his proverbial place by relegating him to second-class citizenship." And so in many respects, she was a freedom fighter, out there telling the truth, telling the stories from a perspective that nobody else could. She was not only the first one the first black woman credentialed inside the White House, but also Senate and the Supreme Court as well. So glad that we're getting the opportunity to finally tell her story.
Greg Carr, what also is interesting when you talk about this story, so many people obviously look at, black folks who work in media in mainstream. That didn't really happen until after the Kerner Commission report in 1968, which said there were two Americas, one white, one black. And the only place you really had black folks who were able to work was in the black press. And even when the book, The Race Beat, won the Pulitzer Prize, that book, if it were not for the black press, look, those white reporters who came in covering the civil rights movement, it was black press folks who actually set the table, set the tone. The first the first time Dr. King appeared in any magazine was in Jet and Ebony magazine. He also wrote a column of Ebony magazine as well. And so black press folks like Alice Dunnigan told our story and challenged America.
You know, the interesting thing about that is, in addition to everything you said, Roland, even today, it remains the case. The reason Roland Martin, one of the reasons it's so important that Roland Martin Unfiltered is so important, even as you surround yourself with a lot of women of African descent everywhere, behind the cameras and in front, is that that's still the case even after integration. I mean, here you have a woman, Alice Dunnigan, and again, props to you because you're always reminding us to know this history. She was born in 1906. You know, we share a birthday, April 27th, actually. But she was born while the link to the 19th century, the journalism linked to the 19th century, was still fighting with both fists. We're talking about Ida B. Wells Barnett, who had her own newspapers. And as you've led us through these discussions about Clara Barnett and the Associated Negro Press, we're talking about Carlotta Bass in California. We're talking about what's the sister's name who was closer to Ethel Payne.
Yep.
We're talking about black women who were
It was actually Alice Dunnigan showed Ethel Payne the ropes when she came to cover the White House.
No question. And so what we're saying is these were black women writing in black spaces, often having to fight black patriarchy from black men who nevertheless paved the way for all the black women and men we see today, and we still need these black spaces. The only other thing I would say is tomorrow is Museum Day here in the DMV. That means you can get free admission to any museum in the area. Forget the Smithsonian's, they're always free. The museum costs money to get in.
$25, $24.95.
Get your 2 free tickets tomorrow, the 22nd of September, and you go see that statue of Alice Dunnigan before they take it to Kentucky, because I think that's where it's headed at.
Right, so it'll be at the museum through December 16th. And then it's going to Russellville, Kentucky, and then it'll be placed it'll actually be on a whistle stop all around Kentucky because they want more folks to know that she was from Kentucky to see the actual statue, and then it will go in a museum outside of a museum there in Russellville, Kentucky, which is on the border of Tennessee as well. And so, that museum they found out about this, they commissioned it in 2015, raised the money, and were able to actually make it real. And so we certainly appreciate it being there, being able to live stream the unveiling and to hear the family members. She also was a member of Sigma Gamma Rho, and there were a whole lot of her sorority sisters, including the international president, who were there as well. And so we'll have all of those clips, all those interviews. You can see it on social media. But if you go to our YouTube channel, our Facebook, Periscope, you will actually see the entire unveiling ceremony, plus the panel conversation that took place after that as well. And so we certainly appreciate that. Christian, I know you got to go. Thanks so much for being with us, and we look forward to having you back. Folks, we're going to go to a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Hurricane Maria 1 year after, its impact on Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, and why you still have a sense of indifference in the White House. This is Roland Martin, Unfiltered. Folks, it's been a year and a day since Hurricane Maria devastated Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Now, of course, yesterday we talked about this with Delegate Stacey Plaskett, who represents the Virgin Islands in Congress. She told us that Donald Trump was very slow in terms of getting funds to the islands. But that's not the only way Trump has turned his back on U.S. citizens, which, of course, people in the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico are American citizens. As Hurricane Florence approached the U.S. mainland last week, he dismissed an official Puerto Rican government report that said nearly 3,000 people died as a result of Maria and its after effects. Now, to correct Trump's lies and to tell us what happens to people in communities after a disaster, we're joined by Howard University Associate Professor Dr. Terry Adams. Doc, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
So first of all, let's just cut to the chase. Trump don't give a damn about black and brown people, okay? The reality is he was totally indifferent. He went down to Puerto Rico, sounded like a complete ass by saying, "Oh, you guys are messing up our budget." As Stacey Plaskett said, he wouldn't even visit the Virgin Islands. Met with the governor on a ship there. Still has not visited. And this is somebody who, again, if it's involving black folks, does not care.
Well, I would say that, you know, he is out of touch, and he's out of touch with his own administrators of FEMA. FEMA issued a report on itself that was very critical of its own response, and it noted that it was underprepared, that it had only prepared, I should say, for one disaster during the hurricane season.
So the current FEMA, Donald Trump's FEMA,
Yes,
did their own report.
exactly.
And they admitted
Yes,
they didn't do a good job.
Right.
But he called it an unrivaled success
right,
and an A+.
right. So I would say that we should actually rely on the report of the agency that was responsible for actually responding to the disaster.
That's interesting. I have not heard that report discussed on mainstream media.
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
So the report indicates that, as I mentioned, that it had only prepared for one major hurricane during the hurricane season in the Caribbean islands, and that most of its resources went to the response of Hurricane Irma. So you had, you know, less than 10 days after Hurricane Irma, we had Hurricane Maria, and so
As in, like, we couldn't see that they were formed at the same time. I mean, anybody can look at a map and go, okay, there's one hurricane that's approaching, there's one coming from behind it.
Right.
We might want to watch the one behind it
Right.
because that could impact the same place.
Absolutely. So we have the technological capabilities of predicting when the storms are going to hit. But in terms of getting the resources to where they need to be, it needs to happen days, if not weeks, before the actual storm hits. And because of its location, the FEMA has to be strategic about how it approaches the way it gears up for such storms.
But what I don't understand is, even looking back, and I understand how we want FEMA to be in charge. But when Hurricane Katrina happened, the mayor has to ask for help from the governor.
Right.
The governor has to ask for help of the federal government.
Right.
And then that's when the federal government takes control. So what we saw when General Russell Honore went in, you had when he came in, that was Blanco was waiting for Nagin, and then when Nagin finally said we need help, then she asked for help. He then comes in. Did we have any Honore type figure in Puerto Rico, in the Virgin Islands, who was like, I'm the one in charge, and we're gonna deal with this?
I would say the governor of Puerto Rico, as well as the mayor of San Juan in particular, were very outspoken in the needs that their needs and the required resources. But you could talk all day, but it depends on who's actually listening and who's responding to your needs.
No, well, because again, this is what people don't understand about our U.S. military. When they go into a place, they can erect literally towns overnight.
Right.
They can elect an electrical grade overnight. I mean, we have a level of capacity that I think people really don't think about when you have these. So all this stuff about, well, okay, the power, and yes, they had power issues before, but for Puerto Rico to be in the dark that long, it's crazy.
I agree with you, and I was going to make that point, and I'm glad you made it, actually, that I think we need to rely on the military in these kind of conditions, and why we didn't, I have no idea, because we did in the case of Hurricane Katrina. I think the backlash from some of the images that Americans were viewing, people stranded in floodwaters, people on rooftops, kind of made the government take a critical look at what it was doing at that time, and kind of brought up that we need to have the military step in. And we should have had the same thing in this particular crisis.
Greg Carr, I want to just bring you in here. Again, I mean, this is utter indifference.
Of course.
Kanye West made the comment, George Bush doesn't like black people. Oh, it's real clear for Donald Trump. And frankly, look, he saw white folks in North Carolina, and he's like, hey, we got to get there real soon so I can help pass some food out. And he was ticked off, according to Omarosa, she said on this show, that he was ticked off, that the mayor of San Juan was criticizing him, and he said, to hell with Puerto Rico because she dare criticize me.
Of course. Well, we know the child in chief. We know who he is and what he isn't. And it's good to hear my colleague Dr. Adams talk us through this. And by the way, again, that's why independent black media is important. Where else in the world are you going to see a person who spends a lot of her academic work practice dealing with disaster relief? That's one of her areas of expertise, a black woman. But, in talking through that, we know the military has the capacity. They're in the Carolinas right now. They sent everyone down there and they were ready to deploy. All they needed was the word. But we know Trump doesn't care. We know that now they're talking about sending Ben Carson down there in the next couple of days because he's only worried about his image. At the same time that, the George Washington University report came out, the Harvard report came out, the death toll continues to rise. But finally, the most important thing that Donald Trump has mastered, and this we have to give him, is that when you disconnect completely from the truth and just keep repeating the lie, you reveal the fact that this country really isn't interested in truth. It's all about power. You can't stop him. He's just going to create a different reality. So all we can do is try to create our own base and move to help ourselves.
We are still in this space. As an expert in this space, we've now seen African Americans. In fact, we talked about it yesterday when Trump shouted this Cajun Navy. He actually was talking about a boat that the new Black Panthers actually sent down there. And what we're seeing African Americans. We saw this take place after Katrina. We see African Americans say, you know what, we can't depend upon the Red Cross because of how they've screwed up the number of dollars that they've actually raised as well. And we're seeing black folks say, no, we need our own institutions where our people are being impacted to be able to go into these places and provide assistance. We saw folks, my wife was involved with a group of folks who were helping churches in Port Arthur, in Houston, and some other areas as well, because we used to be able to depend on a Red Cross, but even they can't be trusted these days.
Well, I would say that a lot of smaller communities are forming to meet the needs of its local community areas. I should say small organizations are forming so that we can't just rely on the government, unfortunately, to meet the needs of the people. And so people are stepping up, pushing forward and taking care of the people on the ground. The folks in Puerto Rico, there were many people who teamed up together to help their neighbors. They always say that the first responders are the people next to you. And so we saw that happen during Hurricane Maria, and we're seeing that happen now in the Carolinas.
What if you were sitting before? First of all, obviously we haven't had any hearings because Republicans don't want to even have any hearings. What would you tell Congress folks should be preparing for now?
Okay. I would say that there are some Congress folks who are actually interested in actually looking at these issues. And I would say to them that we need to listen to the people, listen to the voices of those who are suffering. We need to understand that there are both short-term and long-term impacts. People are suffering emotionally, economically, and socially. It takes folks a while to gear back up to living life as they normally had lived before, or reconstructing a brand new life. And we need to put measures in place so that people aren't suffering. So we've talked a lot about the infrastructure, putting in buildings, houses, resources, but how do you help people with their mental health? We need to make sure that we have measures in place so that people aren't struggling through these types of crises on their own.
All right, Doc, we surely appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we're going to go to a break with our HBCU Giving Day, and then we'll be back with my commentary on white conservative evangelicals, how they pretty much don't give a damn when a black Christian is killed, but they are so pro-life. Back in a moment. All right, folks, our HBCU Giving Day University is Lincoln University, the one in Pennsylvania. Of course, founded in 1854. Of course, notable alumni, Thurgood Marshall Jr. and also Langston Hughes. I had a great time speaking with their new president, was inaugurated, and so I spoke there. And so if you want to support Lincoln University, please go to lincoln.edu. All right, folks, we have been covering the Botham Jean case for quite some time on this show. Why? Because mainstream media is pretty much stuck on anything Donald Trump tweets. And of course, the Brett Kavanaugh hearing. We want to ensure that his case gets all of the attention that it needs, which is why, of course, we had Ben Crump and Lee Merritt on the show today. But I found something very interesting. So this morning, as I was traveling on the train back from New York City, where I was talking to Tiffany Haddish and Kevin Hart about the new movie Night School. We'll have those interviews for you next week. I was reading today's New York Times. There's this huge front page article in the New York Times talking about how evangelicals are very concerned about the Brett Kavanaugh hearing and how many of them may not go to the polls if somehow Brett Kavanaugh is not put on the Supreme Court. Why? Because they now say if Brett Kavanaugh gets on, they absolutely have a strong 5-vote right-wing conservative majority that will allow them to overturn Roe v. Wade because they are all about being pro-life. And I'm reading the article and I'm seeing Ralph Reed, of course, his Faith and Freedom Coalition, and he's all throughout the article. But then I noticed something, and it hit me. I said, has Ralph Reed said anything about Botham Jean, the Christian who was shot and killed by the police officer in Dallas? So I then went to his Twitter feed, and I realized that after looking for 3 weeks back, I saw nothing. And then Robert Jeffers, of course, he's the preacher down at First Baptist Church in Dallas, a big-time Trump supporter who, of course, is on Fox News as well. He was mighty quiet about Botham Jean as well. Then I looked at Franklin Graham, son of Billy Graham, and he's out here talking about Kavanaugh, and didn't hear a word from Franklin Graham as well. Haven't seen a damn thing from Paula White as well, talking about Botham Jean. Then I thought about Tony Perkins of the Family Research Council. Oh, he's such a super Christian, always about the issue of life and being pro-life, and I didn't see anything about him as well. Of course, earlier this week, we showed you the video of the white preacher in Dallas who spoke about the issue of Botham Jean being shot and killed and why he said it was important to speak about it from the pulpit in a largely white congregation. Here is the reality. White conservative evangelicals don't give a damn about black lives. They love talking about being pro-life, but they only care about life when it is in the womb. Because if you then begin to challenge them on why is it you never see them standing alongside of black preachers when a black person is being shot and killed by a police officer, when they're being brutalized by cops, they are strangely very silent when it comes to that. See, this is no shock because a few years ago, a friend of mine who was a preacher in Omaha, Nebraska, a group of white preachers came to him and they said that they wanted him to stand with them and walk with them in a pro-life march. And he said, no problem, I'm pro-life, I'll stand with you, but I would like for y'all to come with me, to stand in front of some crack houses in our neighborhood to make sure that those crack houses are torn down and folks are dealt with. They said, no, that's your problem. Y'all hear what I just said? They literally said to this black preacher who was about saving the souls and the lives of people who were in crack houses to get them off of drugs, that's your problem. But they wanted him to stand with them when it comes to the issue of abortion. See, that's really the game they're playing because, see, if you are pro-life, then you should be outraged when you see the video of Botham Jean leading his church in worship that previous weekend and then gunned down at the age of 26 in his own apartment. So you rarely ever, matter of fact, not rarely ever, you never see any of these white conservative evangelicals standing with black preachers when it comes to black folks who have been shot and killed with police brutality because, see, they don't give a damn. See, they have situational religion. They have situational ethics, and that's the game they play. So if you don't believe me, wait till Ralph Reed has his conference, his Faith and Freedom conference. And if you look on the agenda, first of all, nearly every Republican who runs for office wants to be at his conference. But if you look at the agenda, you're not going to see many discussions about poverty. You're not going to see many discussions about the issue of race or inequality. Because, see, for them, it's not about the issue of race. It's not about the poor. These are folks who pimp Jesus. These are people who use their so-called prophetic voices to drive a partisan message. But see, again, when it's something else, oh no, they want us to stand together and salute the flag and pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and use our voices that way. But they do not care about African Americans who have been impacted by police brutality. Folks, this is very simple. When you see white conservative evangelicals talk about being pro-life, challenge them. Ask them the question, where do you stand about black men who are innocent, who are in prisons? Where do you stand about folks who have been given the death penalty and then all of a sudden find out that they actually are innocent? Where do you stand when police officers are killing black folks who do not have a gun? See, I don't even recall seeing many of these white pastors standing out there with protesters in Chicago for Laquan McDonald, or when Rekia Boyd was shot in the head, or Ayanna Jones in Detroit, or even Walter Scott in Charleston. It is because they actually don't care. And so I'll say this here. The next time y'all want to come talk to black folks about the issue being pro-life, I suggest you be fully pro-life. I suggest you actually care about all lives. Because see, y'all love saying all lives matter. Because see, you don't like us saying black lives matter because you want us to say all lives matter. Well, so if all lives matter, when the hell y'all gonna actually show up when something happens to one of us? Ralph Reed, I'm waiting. I welcome you to come sit on this set. Tony Perkins, I welcome you to come sit on this set. I would love to talk to Robert Jeffers. I would love to talk to Franklin Graham, but I got a sense they won't come here, probably because, we talk to black people. That's my perspective. I want to give a shout out to all the folks who are supporters of our show, Roland Martin Unfiltered. Pass me that, please. Of course, we have folks who have signed up for our Bring the Funk fan club, who are charter members. And so we want to thank all of you for helping us when it comes to our show. Let me give a shout out to Mary Virginia Douglas, Matthew Starworth, Maxine Chin, Maxine Mayo, Melanie Baldwin, Melody Robinson, Melanie Haynes, Meredith Smith, Michael Baxter, Michael Borda, Michael Bullock, Michael Folks, Michael Green, Michael Ivory, Michael Jones, Michael Powell, Michael Townsend, Michael Yarborough, Michelle Hammond, Michelle Abbott Oliver, Mobius Paradigms LLC, Monica Deidre Green, Monique Rogers, Maya Fairless, Nancy Gaskins, Natalie Weisington, Natalie White, Natisha Harper, Najina McLean, Phyllis Burks, Phyllis Whiteside, Preempt Inc., Priscilla Jones, Project Broken Wings, Radical Inc., Ramika Lawson, Raphael Wright, Rashida Jarman, Rashawn Lee Griffith, Rayford Davis, Raymel Robinson, Remote Office Solutions, Renee, am I reading too fast for y'all? Yeah, I guess I am. Renee Woodard, Research Analyst Group, Ruben Smith, Reba Harris, Richard Urban, Richard Muhammad, Richard Patterson, Rita Reed, Rita Santos, Robert Holmes, Robert Johnson, Robert L. Island Sr., Robin Wetner, Robin Winston, Rochelle Prestige, and Rodney Cutter. So I want to thank all of you folks. If you want to help our show, of course, our cameras were there with Alice Dunnigan. Of course, we live streamed the whole event as well. Like I said, other media was there, but I didn't see any of these black folks. Like these black websites out there, maybe they were a little busy focused on entertainment, which is what they pretty much focus on. But that's not what we focus on here. And so we need your support to make this happen. So go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can join our Bring the Funk fan club by using Square, by using PayPal as well, because this is about the people. This is independent, covering our news our way, and of course having our voices every single day, 5 days a week. Folks, I got to go. Don't forget, we're going to restream this show at 10 p.m., 2 a.m., 6 a.m., and 10 a.m. as well. You can always see it on the VOD, on YouTube, Facebook, Periscope. I say you go to YouTube first because actually we get paid higher on YouTube for my clips than everybody else. So I'm going to give them an extra shout out as opposed to the other platforms. And so Periscope and Facebook, if y'all want to actually send more money, we'd appreciate that. But also, don't forget, you can also download our podcast, audio podcast and video podcast. We make it possible for every which way for you to see this show. Look, have a absolute great weekend. Today's Friday. Praise the Lord. Okay, I can actually get some rest tomorrow. So I will see you guys next week. We'll be broadcasting live on Tuesday from the Spirit Democracy Awards, Melody Campbell's group. So we're looking forward to that. Have a great weekend. Also, last thing, this weekend we'll be restreaming every single show this week, plus the ceremony of Alice Dunnigan, the unveiling, plus the course panel, and the Home Free USA speech I gave on housing. We'll also be streaming that this weekend, and so go to all our platforms and check it out. I got to go. Holla!